Okay, we have one last presentation this evening. It's Cam Stewart and Winona Lafreniere. Cam is with the Rotary Club of Calgary East, and Winona is with Calgary North. They're going to come up and introduce themselves, so if you can just enjoy them.
So, Bonjour, Zawana Kwek, Izisikwedijnakas. My spiritual birth name is Hainun Woman. I am from the Treaty 4 territory in Manitoba. I am Anishinaabe. I speak Ojibwe, and I have been a visitor in Alberta now for 22 years, so I haven't left yet, so thank goodness. And I'm just fortunate to be here on Treaty 7 territory to honor the Blackfoot, who I'm very fortunate to be able to work with. So my brother Cam is walking around with the smudge. And one of the things we often say to our non-Indigenous brothers and sisters, being Indigenous, is that we don't force our values or our culture or our knowledge on folks. So if you've been part of a smudge ceremony before, that's awesome, because it's a wonderful ceremony to be part of. I teach my children this way of life. It's worked for me, considering I've gone through a lot of trauma in my life. So being part of Rotary, I volunteered for Red Cross for 22 years. So I've been to Haiti, New York, Philippines, Slave Lake, Fort Mac, and then the High River, the Calgary flood here. So, with my years of service, I did start my Rotary experience in Grand Prairie, and that's where I met Tracy. Wonderful spirit. Thank you for being a sister in spirit, because that's truly what reconciliation is. It starts from the heart, starts from you, starts from that self-love, and then projects out into your community, your families. And so what Cam just did is he walked a smudge around, and I want to thank you for that, because to me that's honoring our way of life, and that's all of you, blessing you for being here. And what it does is it cleanses that mind, body, and spirit. So then what happens is it gives room to allow for positive energy to come into your life and let go that negative energy that we pick up on a day-to-day, because we don't know what's out there. We don't know what we're going to face on any given day. And every breath that we take, we're honoring that air, that land, that water, that we're so, for us as Indigenous people, so connected to, because everything on this planet is interconnected, right? So we follow that natural way and that order, and that allows us to be strong and to be resilient and to do the work that we need to do in our communities, because we're struggling. And I think we're struggling in mainstream as well. So I think it's time for us to come together, join hands, and open your minds and your hearts to some of the things you're going to hear over the next hour. And I want to pass the mic on to my brother Cam, and thank you. I love you very much for that. And yeah, hi.
Yeah, my name, does this work? Oh, there it is. Yeah, my name's Cam. My Blackfoot name is Magusta Pinakum, Red Morning, and I carry that with big honor. I got that from Herman Yellow Old Woman from Siksika. And it's great power, and it comes from his family and ancestors, which usually doesn't happen. Usually a name doesn't get passed down, but I was honored to do that. And I was honored in my life as well to get this eagle feather from Elder Doreen Spence and her teachings, a Cree woman. I've been honored. Ashley Prairie Chicken, many elders, Blackfoot, Sony Nakota, Pakani. And so I've been blessed to receive teachings by elders, knowledge keepers, helpers, scapios, and general nice people in the community. And they have allowed me to learn and on my journey, and they have allowed me to share. And so I'm here, and my path, again, I'm not Indigenous, but my path and my being invited by the good people of Rotary to be on this committee, to have the foresight to have Indigenous Committee, Relations Committee, which includes Winona, Bradley, David, Stephen. Past district governors have been very supportive of this. Jim Rauschenberger, Jennifer, I saw her today. This is a team effort, and the elders who have gone along with us and blessed our processes. We're doing it in an Indigenous way. We're not indigenizing Rotaria, but we're all walking this together. So thank you, sister, for this. Can I have the PowerPoint on? Great, thanks. So our presentation, and it's going to be short because we only have a bit amount of time, but we can always, you want me over further? Sure. Is that better? Okay, good. And so our presentation is, what kind of ancestor do you want to be? And so it really ties in to many of the things we've heard today and heard this morning. And so what I'd like to do is for you to invite someone to this room, to this space today, an ancestor, someone who's passed, someone who can bring energy with us today. So I want you to think about that for a second. And I want you to think of what you would want their descendants or relatives to have a positive impact on Rotary. So let's think about that, and while you're thinking, I'm going to tell you who I'm going to bring into this meeting space today. I'm actually going to bring my Siti, my grandmother, Rosazes, and she came from Syria, immigrated, and her and her husband Alfred, they tried homesteading just outside of our district in Saskatchewan. And they tried, and I know they probably knew some Indigenous people in their journeys, but they couldn't make it. They went back. My grandmother, her tenets were family, faith, and community, and she was a strong woman. The other person I'd like to invite here, is my dad. My dad, he was a Rotarian, and he traveled around the world, and he didn't actually inspire me to come to Rotary. It was other Rotarians in this room and around this province that inspired me. But my dad was a Rotary district governor. He actually founded the Mississauga Cancer Center, and his ancestry is really interesting because his family came from Ireland. They homesteaded in Lacombe, Alberta, and I actually have in my house still the cowbell, old Mall's bell, and that they couldn't make it. This was in 1890, just 20 years after the signing of Treaty 7. They couldn't make it. They went back, and of course, the birds and the bees happened. My parents met in Ontario, and here I am. And so I know that they would be, that they would want us and want me to work with Indigenous people and on a journey on reconciliation. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you for that, Cam. And for me, it's my cookum, who really rescued me from despair when I was 12 years old from a lot of sexual violence and abuse in the home. She was a medicine woman, so she taught me her ways, her knowledge. So needless to say, I continue to pass her legacy on, and I've learned a lot about, the land, which is why I spend a lot of time working with our Mother Earth. She's the one that's going to sustain us for a long, long time. So that's where my passion lies, and I show folks how to connect with that spirit. And the other one that I call on is my father, who passed during COVID, and he taught me how to run a business. So that entrepreneurial spirit started when I was 8 years old. So those two gifts have really helped me, along with my service through all my years of, 3 decades of volunteer experience in Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities, to continue to grow that legacy, because I'm sending messages to a time I'm not going to see. And hopefully all my children who are kind of working in this space, because my oldest daughter is a social worker, my son's going in to prepare to become a firefighter for the city of Calgary, and my daughter works for cleaning homes for the elderly, and she volunteers at an animal shelter. So there you go. I think I'm modeling something good. So thank you. But it comes from, my ancestors. So thank you.
All my relations. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So next for you. You can go
Thank
on
you.
to 7 principles.
So with the 7 generation principles, what a lot of our elders are saying now around 7 generations, it's going to go well beyond the 7, because we know that stewardship, it's going to take us a long time. When you think about, net zero by 2050, we have to really, I think, as individuals, look at what we're going to do and play our small part. Things like me taking the LRT versus driving my vehicle to work, right? Making my own compost at home for my garden. So it's for us, we see it as a responsibility, because you often hear in the news, and it's very negative, that our people are against development. And that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is we approve of it, but it has to be done responsibly, in recognition for not only the land, air, water, but those future generations. That's critical. Always think as if we're looking 100 years ahead from now when you make a decision, because that decision is going to impact every one of those children that come after us. So collectively, that voice, I think, is important, but we can't do it alone. We need your voice in there too. So I think we're at that crossroads right now, and it's a very critical and pivotal time for us to start having those conversations, and because the doors are opening now, and we're seeing industry knocking on our door at Indian Resource Council and saying, how do we engage? I said, you got to let go of that fear, because we have fear too as Indigenous people. So if we knock down those walls and those borders, then essentially you're going to start to see a lot of progress. And I'm seeing it. I want to be positive and hopeful, right? So with that's the whole essence of all my relations, is to say to all of you, because when we signed that treaty and we shook hands, we said we're going to go down this river and paddle together in the same direction and do it as equal partners. That was the original intent of those treaties. And when you see that symbolism on our treaty medal, that's what we're saying, is let's work as if we're tied together. But there's still a lot of silos, still a lot of division, still a lot of difference in perspectives, so we have to learn. We've learned Western ways and perspectives. Now we're saying, you're welcome to come and learn our ways, so that we can better understand where we're coming from with our views as well as yours, because we've respected, and we always will respect and honor your way of being in the Western world. But we want you to do the same and reciprocate that. So our hearts, our communities, our families, our language, our customs are open to you all. With that, I say, miigwech.
And one of the things I was taught after someone speaks or after I say something in a circle is all my relations. And that is, again, part of the cycle of family and traditions and generations, of bringing in our ancestors, but also for our descendants. And all our relations that beyond just what we're used to in our secular two family, two kids family and stuff like that, but it's all our relations. But indigenous peoples across this country go beyond that when they say on the relations. It means the animals. It means Mother Earth. It means the trees. It means the rocks, the mountains, as Winona said, the rivers. It means everything around us. It means the moon, the sky. And so it's a much more thing. It's a much more harmonious way of thinking. And so an interesting picture of some artwork here is how it's all interconnected. And I think it's important for us that when we're thinking about that, it's not just about ourselves. And I think all of us are all trying to live that. It's service about self, but it's also service to all our relations. And so one of the things I always like to have in my presentation is about the Rotary's international commitment to DE&I. And I want you to look at this and think about, it recognizes that we need, or that Rotary has to do some things, and it has to do some things well. It's about equity and all those other big words, and community partnerships. But it also identifies those that have been not at the table. They haven't been recipients of our funds. They haven't been invited, as we heard Tony talking yesterday about, they invite us to their powwows, but do we invite them to our meetings and our celebrations and stuff like that? And so it is about who is not at the table and why, and how do we do that? In particular, what we're talking about today is Indigenous people, our neighbors across the ways, sometimes next door to us in our cities. Go ahead.
Okay, so this is an interesting one for me, right? Because I was at a hydrogen conference in Edmonton last week, and this young gentleman from Alexander stood up and said, I would love, to see the day where we're not doing land acknowledgements, and what we're focusing on is building those treaties, right? Because through the work that we're doing, that's what essentially we're doing. We're building these communities up, right? We're advancing reconciliation. And for me, when people ask me what that means, I said it's about that love, it's about that kindness, it's about that respect, and that it's going to take a lot of education and awareness for us to get to that common goal and understanding of what that means, because there's 94 calls to action, right? And there's a history that goes way back. And I would say if you want to learn, start with reading the TRC calls to action and looking at yourself in a mirror and saying, what are my calls to action here, right? I'm not saying you owe us anything, but what we're saying is there are a lot of issues. I look at the crisis looming in this province right now, north of us. I talked to Chief from Fox Lake yesterday, and I cried. They lost 20 homes, and I'm thinking I have to do something. I'm part of an organization, these clubs in Alberta can join me and walk with me and hold hands with me to help our brothers and sisters that have lost their homes, because it's going to take resources and time to rebuild those homes. They also lost a food store and a police station, and most of you may have heard of the news already, and we know these anomalies are not going to end, because we know if you've been awake the last even couple of years, you're seeing what's happening to our mother planet. When I look at this smudge, I look at when I see a fire, that's our mother smudging herself. She's saying, I need to cleanse too from all of this activity. And when you see the floods, she's flooding her spirit. She's wounded. So we have to start looking at, okay, what can we do to change this? Because time is ticking, it's running out on us, right? She's always gonna be here. She'll be here long beyond, when we're gone, she'll be still here, she'll be thriving, but we could do something to change that. And through our reconciliation efforts, I think not just thinking in terms of the land, air, water, and the animal life and the sky spirits, but as humans, I said we can make a huge impact and dent in that. And I think when you talk about diversity, equity, inclusion in our communities and in mainstream, that's a lot in itself, because we need to break down those stereotypes. And I'm not a typical stereotype, because I'll be damned if my kids are going to be oppressed. I broke that cycle, and I broke it for a reason, because I found my purpose at a young age. And I love Mark Twain, and one of his quotes is, I'll never forget when I read that quote, the purpose of life is to have, life purpose. And I know when I was 8 years old, I found it, but I didn't know how to reach that, or how to accomplish that, or extend my arms out to someone to say, help me, right? So it's important, I think, through reconciliation, when you look at our viewpoints and when we bridge that, and there's a lot of gaps that we have to, to work on, I think on both sides, and I want to be right here, right? I want to be and work with heart and have you all on board with me, because I know my brother Cam's doing an amazing work, and he received an award internationally, and I want to say thank you, Miigwech Ai Masichu, for all that hard work. And I just want to say I love you from the bottom of my heart for doing that, because what you're saying and what you're doing through your committed actions and your words is you're addressing this at the highest level and standard possible, and it gives people like me hope. So thank you very much. I know that was a little long, but
Thank you. And so, reconciliation and reconciliation equals action, as you saw on that last slide. And I think it's really important for us to learn the lessons of those who've gone before us, that have tried this, and that have tried it in Rotary, have tried it in government, where I work, have tried it in industry. But we can learn from those, from doing it, and the mistakes. And we're going to make mistakes at this, and because we are people, Indigenous people are people, and there's always going to be some conflict. But conflict is not all bad. And so, on this slide, you'll see a bunch of things that you can do or you should do to look at this. One of the biggest things that I find is it's nothing about us without us. We would not expect Indigenous people to come into a Rotary Club and try to change us. So why would we think anything else? And so it's working with communities, with elders, listening. And on the previous slide as well, you saw that there was education. And what we've learned in our committee is education is a two-way street. And I know most clubs and most Rotarians and most communities are doing their darndest to get educated. But what we learned when we went into Indigenous communities, they knew nothing about Rotary. And so we are working with them, and they are also getting educated, and the youth are getting educated. And so it's not going to be 7 generations, but we are going to work on this. You have anything to add?
Yeah, well, I think we should go to the next slide, because I know where our time is, and then I'll add as we go.
Okay. So
there we go.
And speaking of action, Rotarians are people of action. So this is the award I got from Rotary International. And this is the district's award. This is, but it actually, the work that I could have done could not have happened without people, leaders in this room, district governors, all the way down through the governor streams that have been doing this and doing little things, steps along the way that have allowed and the opportunity to this committee to get invited to be on the leadership team. And so there's the governors, many of who are here, many here I know, and again, it's been inspiring when I've done my research and talked to people, and somebody said, oh, this district governor this, and this, and so this club president did this. It's been just inspiring to see those leaders and those Indigenous leaders that have been along the journey. Some of them were up on the stage yesterday, but there's many more that have helped our clubs on our journeys. And many of you have seen their presentations virtually or in person. Oops, wrong way.
Okay, so through Rotary, as you know, we talk a lot about the development goals that the United Nations has set out for, I guess, the world to look at. So the 7 principles that we identified, obviously, I think, to be honest, Rotary does touch on all 17. But we can't simply do all this work. We rely on other folks and other sister organizations to do this work alongside us. But through basic literacy, child health, peace and conflict, water, sanitation, supporting the environment, community and economic development, disease prevention and treatment. When I think about a lot of these development goals and I look at our history with Indigenous people in this country, we had a form of governance. We had a way of life prior to European contact. And a lot of our chiefs will tell you, we've done all of this work. We know exactly what you're talking about, right? Because we're at that point now where we're saying we have an Indigenous science, much like Western science, that can lend, right? That we can work with our Western scientists to come up with, co-create, co-develop, co-innovate a lot of these frameworks that I find people are struggling to develop. And one of the ladies talked about it earlier, about the lack of policies and mandates in all levels of government, your municipal, your provincial, and your federal. Because I've worked in all of those systems. That's what allowed me to take all of this knowledge and start my own company, right? And so it's wonderful to be able to do some of this work at that level and take this knowledge to places like Africa. I spent a month in Rwanda in December to talk to Indigenous women and young girls, and I'm working on a reforestation project there right now. So I'm able to take what I know as an Indigenous person, plop that over in Rwanda and say but you have to have those meaningful conversations because you allow the community to make those choices. You don't go in there and say, you're gonna do this, right? And that's what's been done to us for so long. Our past, present, and future is strategically designed to destroy our people. And we're saying, no, we're not gonna allow that anymore. Because now we've got our languages are coming back to some degree. I'd like to see more languages being taught in our schools. It's slowly coming. They're investing more money there. But at the same time, what I want to say through the Indigenous Relations Committee, any of you are welcome to become a part of this committee. Because we've got a lot of interesting work and projects planned. I've got like 10 projects on the go right now. And I want a real Rotary into all 10 if I could, and say, how would you like to work with me on a project at Red Deer Polytechnic, working with Indigenous youth to look at exposing them to careers in AI, artificial intelligence, robotics, coding, 3D printing, animation, and they're gonna learn how to build drones next summer because I'm working on a project. And that's a way to welcome and leverage that technology in society, because I got into the drone business. It's an $82 billion industry right now. And if you get in now and you're just, 5 years from now, it's like, wow, I'm gonna need to look at scaling my company because of the need. But they're using this technology in a lot of places. So it's important that we, as Rotary members, we open our minds and hearts to that innovation and that creativity that's coming into the door and welcome that. Because I just joined here not even a year ago, but I feel like as a new member, do I have the right to come in and say, let's do it this way or let's do it that way? I need to feel that welcome. right? And put my pride and judgment and everything aside and just say, I'm going to assume that these guys are open to this and want to work with me on these projects, right? But yeah, we essentially touch on a lot of these, and you look at some of these actions, right? I know that I'm going to pass it over to Cam to reference some of the work that's already being done, but there's a lot yet that's to come, and I'm pretty excited, so.
Yeah, and so, you know, the work that our committee's doing, we're standing on the shoulder of giants. The work that clubs are doing and that we've been, and this isn't an exhaustive list. This is just some that we know of. And so if you don't see your club on here, get a hold of us, because we're trying to, as well as measure the success of the district. But this district, and Steve knows this, and I've been contacted by Rotarians across the country, we're pulling more than our weight in Indigenous work, Indigenous relations. Yes, yes. Clap yourself. It's true. And so, you know, again, you know, opened up a oneness center in Cochrane in February, and it was just so powerful that Cochrane and the town of the people and business got all involved with it. I'll tell you, I work across Indigenous communities across Alberta. I haven't seen an Indigenous center open up in a small town or city in decades. And for it to start happening because of Rotary, that's powerful. And again, all of these, I don't want to go through it all, but all of them are, all of your individual members and your clubs and leadership, they're all doing that. They're all doing something. And I wanted to, you know, celebrate, but as well as have our ancestors. They'd be looking down at us now. Every one of you who has done anything here or done anything, I know many people here that's not on here, they'd be with us and celebrating. They'd be clapping. Our previous, you know, our previous members that those roses stand for. I know that some of them out of our club. Some of them, you know, they supported this. They voted. They supported the initiatives and that we were doing. And so, again, our ancestors, they're smiling down at all of us for all our work we've done. But where are we going to go now? What are our descendants going to say about us?
So there's many things you can do to address, and you know, when you're looking at the TRC as well as the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, we know the Indian Act is not going to go anywhere soon. That's what our chiefs want to say, is we'd love to scrap it, but you still have to have some legislation in place of that. And they are looking at UNDRIP, but we don't know if that's going to happen in my lifetime. But some calls to action that I often reference to people is, you know, you look at how you can build friendships, relationships with Indigenous people. I often get asked and calls by industry to say, okay, where do we start? I say, well, you have one of these, right? Right? A cell phone? I'll give you the chief's number of so-and-so, right? Let them know I'm passing it on to you, because really that's all it takes. Or I can invite them to a powwow or treaty days or a career fair that's happening in that community, and I'll take you there and I'll introduce you to the chief and council. And sometimes that's how we do it, because you know it's uncomfortable work on both sides, right? So I always say education is big too. We often get asked to come and do cultural awareness, or through my organization, you know, where I work full time, I write reconciliation action plans for folks, for industry, right? We do a lot of things. We worked with TELUS on developing their framework. And I looked at, once their framework was done, and I thought through their HR policy, they're allowing Indigenous employees to go and attend the sweat lodge in their community, and they're going to cover the costs. Much like if I were to go get some therapy, like yoga, or if it's massage or counseling, or you know, to go see a psychologist, same thing. Why don't you value our traditions and our healing practices and cover that? So I thought, wow, they did a phenomenal job. If you get a chance to look on their website, I'd encourage that, because they're taking massive steps to address a lot of what we're talking about in the TRC, and recognizing the contributions that you're making towards these communities as well. I would say even start with visiting a community they're always more than welcome to have you come out, attend a powwow, right? There's a lot of knowledge keepers in Lethbridge here as we speak. Like we listened to a few of them the last couple days. So there's a lot you can do. If you have any questions, Cam or I've got a huge network in Alberta that I can say, yes, I know of somebody. And if I don't, guess what? I know somebody who knows somebody that can connect you, right? I think we all have those resources and networks in our back pockets or front pockets, wherever,
Yeah.
our cell phones.
And the other thing to take action, people say, well, what do I do? Well, one, we talked about maybe starting a committee in your group or a working group, but put it in your budget. Things cost money to do this. Tobacco, one of the most important, we heard, I think Tony yesterday talked about tobacco.
Yeah,
It's really
Mother Earth.
Tobacco, Mother Earth. So tobacco, honorariums, gifts, they're very important. And so, your board meeting was put $500 towards the project to get it started. And I know many clubs now are doing that. They're starting off in this calendar year with a budget item, trying to figure out what it is, but at least put it in the budget item. And again, I want to thank recent past governors. This committee is only about 2 years old, but recent past governors, and Steve Levitt, our current governor, who has been all through his DG stream. He's been a big supporter and a leader of us, and I wanted to give him this tobacco.
Is that the last slide?
That's yours.
Okay, so when you see the treaty medal, that's exactly what I'm talking about. That was, to me, the intent was to have that peacemaking treaty signing. And this was back in 1800s. And so when they shook hands, that's what we thought, that there was going to be that equality when they signed that treaty. But that didn't happen. So now we have to look at what can we do, because we're not going to get our land back. We're not going to get those resources back. We're not going to get those profits in our communities. So all we can do is, going forward, looking at our past, present, and future, looking at how this is going to impact our children and their children. So we want to leave a long-lasting legacy. And I always say this to people I run into. The two most important days in your life is the day you're born and the day you figure out why. And it's that just resonates with me. That's another one of Mark Twain's quotes, right? So I'm like, wow. And so here I am, 54 years later with 7 kids, and when I get a single guy inviting me for dinner, and I tell him I have 7 kids. And I'm like, bye, right? Because it scares them. But the way I look at it, my 3 children, my one daughter's got 4 little ones. I've got 4 grandchildren, right? This is the reason I do what I do, because I want them to have a future. I want them to have hope going forward, because it's scary. It's scary doing this work, and there's a lot of risks doing this work, but I do it because I love humanity, I love our planet, and I love life, and I love all of you, and thank you for allowing us to give us the opportunity to share a little bit about who we are as storytellers, as philanthropists, as people who support each other, because it's going to be a lot of work going forward, but it's okay. I'm with you, right? Thank you.
So